Hi folks, so I am recording over a recording so I can provide audio input here. This is my replay of the blue shootout the other night at Chateau Whistler. I restarted with about 35 minutes left, which for me that's pretty quick to play 9 holes and actually get any kind of calculations going. So I took off a bit of topspin here that was I took off about 1 bar too much. I should have kept it about 1 bar from max, and it was about 2. Yeah, you'll see. So you see there it was about 4.1. I should have done the full 6 bars. Just got a little bit too cute with it. Or not a full 6, but a full 5 would have put me very close to the hole. So squandered a good win there that would have given me a really nice tiebreaker. And this is where Lima, who was my primary competition, that's Reagan Lemire, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, he got a 1765 tiebreak on this hole. Drove it right next to the flag. So typically, my strategy tends to be to try to play on par 4s and sometimes on par 5s. If I can play to where I'll be close to max Bigfoot and have an adjustment of right at 4 rings, that's what I prefer to do. A lot of times I'll start a tournament that has free replays or corn replays. Okay, so first of all, let me break from that subject. I'm measuring the rings back from max. There's 20 rings I've counted so far from max distance with the Spectre 8. And I ended at 21.5 rings from max right there. I think I do another move, yeah. So there's 21.9 rings. Okay, so I finished it at 22 rings from max. And then I'm playing with spin, trying to get lined up to counter the wind. Excuse me. I'm trying to counter that wind, which is not very strong, so I only added about 1.5 bars of backspin, of counterspin to the backspin. So it was about 5.1 and then 5.2. Now I made it about 6.6, 6.7. And doing counterspin is a combination of just eyeballing it and kind of experience. So I've had a lot. Counterspin is my primary method for wedges and short irons in any wind, and then for long irons and woods and even drivers some. Like on par 3s. for the drivers, and for any holes where I can reach with a long iron or wood, I'll generally do a little bit of counter spin unless it's a very soft and flat green. So like Harbor Town greens, you don't really need any counter spin there unless it's a straight crosswind, and then I'll just try to use enough to make the ball hold its line on the ground. So I've done my adjustment, and now I am correcting the jerry. Jerry is when after you do your initial wind adjustment, you make a straight push or pull, either forward just a bit further, like I'm about to do right here. It's not much at all. That was like a 20th of a ring. And I did not counterspin it enough with the side spin. It was a little hot with the back spin. So, Jerry is a term from Golf Clash after a guy named Jerry Levesque, who's probably, in my opinion, the best field player of all time. He's always used cheap balls, typically plays with a basic ball. If you'll match basics with him in Golf Clash, I don't think he's actually played this game at all. But he learned to make that move. So you do your normal wind adjustment, and from point A where you started, like there's my setup. Now I'm going to adjust for the wind about 2.75 rings. The center ring I play is 2.2, so that's 2.65, then I went a little past, so about 2.7 rings, which might be a little light. Now this is also a jerry, but this is just to bring it back to max distance accurately. This is not an elevation adjustment. So that was point B, where I adjusted for the wind, and then C is where you're going to end up after the jerry. So I got a headwind, primarily a headwind on this hole, and in a headwind I like to use Hellfire 7. Excuse me, because it's got better shot view than root, and it's better to be rolling gently to the cup rather than bouncing at a sharp angle with still a lot of backspin. I think this is a no jerry hole if I remember correctly. It might have been just a baby. So a jerry forward, it's always perspective from the golf ball. If your adjustment from point A to point B, which is your starting aim point to your adjusted aim point, that's A and B, if that takes you to lower ground, then you need to figure out how to compensate for it, because decreasing the trajectory, your impact on a club's trajectory, is going to shorten the distance that it flies in this game. That is one of the, I don't know if I'd call it a coding issue, but it is a factor that is present in both Ultimate Golf and Golf Clash. I learned it primarily in Golf Clash, but have definitely seen it's a real thing in this game too, because the physics engine bases the trajectory of a club off the end point. So if you aim lower, it does not allow you to just aim lower and keep the same distance. It's actually decreasing the trajectory, because the game does not allow you to alter the overall trajectory. So aiming now at a lower point will not allow you to just have a lower trajectory and go the same distance. You keep the same trajectory, but it shortens the distance. So right here, this is where I'm making my calculation, which I play on a Samsung Galaxy S6 tab. I think I must have jerried here just a bit. We'll see in a second. So I play, my actual gameplay is on this tablet. I do use a calculator. Never tried to hide that fact. But I do use a pretty sophisticated series of calculations to triangulate the distance to where my final aim point will be, not where I started adjusting from. So right now I'm several rings short of max distance, but when I do this adjustment right there of about 3.18 rings, just pulling across from that dark edge where I started, across the first dark edge, and then across the center, the double ring, it's like the donut hole, that was 3.1 rings, and then did just a fraction more. And so I do jerry here, I reverse jerry back to the ball just a touch, like two clicks, and it ends up being pretty perfect. I think this one went in nicely. It went in the left edge, but distance wise it was about as perfect as it gets. If that had missed, it still would have been a 1790 tiebreaker, less than a foot away. So this was a much tougher wind. Generally, I would not use a UC Gold Cup ball in just a red or blue shootout. There was a certain extra bit of competitive spirit I had here. Partly frustration of not being able to drive it on the green because I just misjudged how much spin, and partly because I had Lima in my bracket, who is very much an up-and-coming player. When you respect somebody a lot, it tends, I think, to make you more competitive, so... And I knew with that wind it was going to put me to the very edge of where I could have a reasonably good chance to drop a hive shot. So this right fringe tends to kick the ball a little bit harder with top spin, left spin. When it comes to wedges, I'm always trying to get the shot view lined up with the wind as much as possible. So I get an angled headwind at that, kind of pointing around between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. So I'm going to use, of course, top spin, and then use left spin so that my ball is rolling a little bit more into the wind, and that increases your margin for error. Right here I am measuring the distance, those lines I've got in the center. The video quality is not great, so you can't really tell, but I'm measuring the distance from where my ball is to the bullseye for the landing spot. I've kept up a lot of data for wedges, and in particular hive, since I maxed it about, I think, close to 4 months ago now. Lots of misses, a good number of makes, And usually inside of about 25% range, I hit about 90%. This one I want to say was close to 31%. So it's like basketball. You see guys like Steph Curry, Damian Lillard are hitting 50% of their threes from just behind the arc. Put them out, more towards 30 feet instead of 25, 26 feet. The percentage goes way down. This one I snuck in the left side. I guess it wasn't too off center. So at this point, I know now that I have a chance of catching Lima's minus 17. So another thing on these par threes, when I have the ability to do so, I prefer to use a power 7 ball because all my calculations are based off of the max and min distance for particular clubs using power 7 balls. So I prefer to use the power 7 to set my distance and get a ring count back from max or up from min club. And then I can switch to a higher power ball, usually with the same the same wind reduction. So you saw the first time I did not counter the wind enough, even though it was a mostly straight tailwind, about an 75 to 80 degree tailwind, just a little bit of tilt, I think, to the right, if I remember correctly. And now we've got closer to a 40 degree, I think it's about a 36 degree headwind, and a 54 degree crosswind left to right. So it's still going to push back against my shot view it's going to add effectively about a bar, 1 to 1.2 bars of backspin. And I'm trying to remember what I actually did here. Let's see when I adjust the spin again. Okay, so I must have already done it. So I think I went from heavy 3 to light 2, and then did almost a full bar of side spin as well. So no, I went to heavy 2. That's what it was. Still showing it's going to go past the hole a bit. So on these, I'm usually trying to get it to where the ball's going to go about a yard behind the pin. So kind of, you see the ring that the cup is in right now, that lighter colored ring. I want the ball to actually get to about the back of that ring, from the tee to the back of that ring, and then slide in the back door. I don't remember what this adjustment was, honestly. I'm thinking with that yardage in that wind direction, about 3.85 rings. And another painful lip out. So I failed twice to counter the wind enough horizontally. And at this point, I know my chances are really slim, because I need to go 8 under in the last 4 holes just to tie Lima's score. I hadn't even looked at his tiebreaker, honestly. I didn't know that he had driven the green on number 1. I just remembered looking at his score, so right here, this is another trick. This is called, what I'm about to do is called a power pull. Each club has a certain number of rings where a max miss, like that, a max miss to one side will move the aim a certain number of rings. For Red Barchetta 7, it's right at 20 rings. And the reason you do that is to gain elevation. The same thing I was talking about with the Jerry. I can put that shot view at a certain spot. Excuse me. I can put that shot view at a certain spot. That's higher, and because it's going to increase the trajectory, the power for max power always stays the same. So when you increase the trajectory, a higher launch angle, it's going to end up going a little bit further. It probably only gained me 2 to 2.5 yards in that case, but it was enough. It made the difference here, because that extra little bit of distance, about another ring or so, that enabled me to use more backspin on the second shot here and control it. So the fairway is plenty wide. It's more, I haven't been able to run even an RB7 drive through the fairway with a Tour Pro ball and headwind. So this is for Hellfire 7. Max distance is about, with a Power 10 ball, is about 3.6 rings further than max distance with Power 7. So this is going to be about a 3.12 ring adjustment. 3.15 maybe. Yeah. Looks like that's what I did. So go up. Somehow the wind did just hold it out to the right a little bit. Distance was perfect, but I'm going to blame that one on my offset / counterspin. So now I need to go -6 on my last 3 holes. I need an eagle, a hole-in-one eagle, or eagle birdie albatross, or birdie hole-in-one albatross, just to get to -17. And at this point, I still don't know that Lima had driven the green and had a big tiebreaker lead on me. But I did know I was not leaving this drive short. And I probably should have still given it a little bit more. I did take off a touch of topspin, and it really didn't need to come off. So I'm actually using those green squares. I knew they were measuring about 10.8 to 11 rings across 2 sections of the green squares. So I counted back a ring from what it shows max distance because it never does actually go that far. Yeah, it definitely needed full top spin there. The way I lined up that drive is not a super precise way of measuring, but it's a little bit easier to do while you have view of the shot view at the maximum range you can reach. Pretty much only do that method in a tailwind. And I still, at this moment in the round, did not know that Lima had me by that much on tiebreaker. I just knew that if I dropped this, excuse me, if I dropped this one, I only had to eagle to tie him. So we count back 10 rings. I think it ended up being like 16.4 or something. There's 10, there's 6. This is one of the toughest winds you can get for a Spectre. An angled tailwind. And if you recall, my last 2 attempts on this par 3, both times I did not counterspin enough against the wind. So I was not going to make the same mistake again a third time. So we had about 1.3-ish bars in the backspin. There's that lovely little donut that sits around the cup from about 2 inches to 8 inches away. If you're inside of that donut, it usually falls. If you get on top of it, it usually kicks it off. I was definitely pretty painstaking with this setup because I knew I had to have one of these drops just to tie the score. And I don't know why I didn't check and see what the tiebreaker situation was. So all that was to figure out how much I needed to jerry, which wasn't a lot. Now finally, the jerry. Oops. Hold on, let me back this up. Sorry, I accidentally dozed off there and hit my home button. So we'll get to see this jerry again, which was not a lot. So the cup is 4 1/4 inches across. And that was about a 4 to 5 inch jerry, about a cup. Finally, estimated the spin correctly, almost dead center. And now is when I look and see Lima has an insane tiebreaker. And then see he drove the green within the shadow of the flagstick on number 1. So I have no chance of catching the tiebreaker without dropping this albatross, which is why, with it being the back right pin, I used a second UC gold ball. And here I go to the center of the fairway because I need reach more than I need the angle. That back pin is definitely a long way. So there's 10 rings. And another 20. And I'm running low on time at this point. I had about 3 minutes left. .318 honestly is pretty good into a headwind there. So this one, because I was short on time, I didn't touch the calculator. Pretty much knew as low as that wind was, and with it being at basically power 11 max by the time I adjust, I know roughly what it is. And I think I ended up doing right at 2.7 rings. It was about 1.03 wind per ring. So I just did like a 10th ring less than 1-to-1 ratio. I set it up inside right of the cup. Just a little bit of an angle to the right on the headwind. And I think that was just a little bit less than max backspin. Yes, I think we counter it here because I knew the green kicked. Maybe it was just alignment. Okay. Oh, it's offset right edge. It's about 2 minutes to go at this point. So I'm measuring from the far edge of the center, the double centering, and then I don't quite come to the inside part of the furthest light ring. Stay off it just a little because that would have been 2.9 rings. So I leave about 2/10 of a ring between the edge of that ring and my reference point, which is that kind of heavier, short horizontal red line. And that's 2.7 rings. A minute to go. And this has to drop for me to take the lead. If it misses, had it missed, I would not have caught him because he had me beat on tiebreaker without that. But the extra 500 tiebreaker and extra shot that dropped is what did it. 55 seconds left. So that is probably the best I've played in a short amount of time for me. I know it's slow, probably painful to watch, but there's a lot going on. That's why, honestly, I am as slow as I am, because I'm very almost hyper analytical about setups, and sometimes I do overthink them, like I did, coming back to this tee shot on one that I left short. If I'd have done the top spin right there, I would have been perfect. I'd have probably had a comparable tiebreaker for that hole to Lima's, so, high 1700s. But it just got a little skittish. I've gone over that green before and didn't want to do it again. I don't post a lot of these tournaments. Don't really care about the people saying grids are cheating and all, because I know that they're not. And it honestly makes sense. Why would you come to a rifle competition where it is perfectly allowed to put a scope on your rifle? Why would you come without one and know that you'll be at a disadvantage and then complain that others are cheating, when, in fact, the ones who make the rules have not said it's cheating? They have made their tolerance of it very clear. They don't necessarily encourage it, but they also do nothing to discourage it. It's just asinine. Anyway, I hope anyone that's watched this enjoyed it and maybe got something out of it that you can apply for your own play. If there are any other questions, you're welcome to message me, Jordan Rumfelt, on Facebook, or you can leave comments below. Thank you.